Good morning everyone and welcome to this week's EOA Better Together webinar. You're very welcome this morning. I hope you've had a good week so far. For those of you who are not familiar with Zoom, if you move your cursor down to the bottom of the screen, you'll see a Q&A button. If you've got any questions to put to the panelists or to me, please use that function, or even if you just want to offer a comment or a view, then please use that. If you've got any technical problems, however, you can't get online or you're struggling to see the videos, please click on the hand function and my colleague Hannah, who is helping today, will be able to support you with that. The video, today's webinar is being videoed and so you will be able to download that later. We've got a really exciting group of people this morning to have a discussion about leadership. Because of that, I think we might run over a few minutes. So if we do and you have to leave, then don't worry, you'll be able to download the video afterwards to catch up. So before we start, I just want to bring you up to speed, as I have been doing each week, on progress around the current crisis in terms of the support the government's offering and, of course, what's happening in the EOA network. So if I start with the job retention scheme, I'm sure many of you are probably already in the process of furloughing employees or have done. In fact, I think the latest British Chambers of Commerce survey says that 74% of the people, the businesses that they surveyed last week, are using the furlough scheme. So what we know so far is that there are about 4 million British workers on furlough, and there have been about 400,000 applications so far since the portal opened last Monday. So far, I think what we're hearing is that it's going very successfully, and as I said, the British Chambers of Commerce survey said that over 50% of the people they questioned had had a stress-free application process, and money is landing in businesses, banks this week, which is great to hear. Probably not quite as positive on the access to finance. The CBIL scheme, the Coronavirus Business Interruption Loan Scheme, whilst the number of applications have gone up, and as of this morning actually, UK Finance have reported the figures as of yesterday, there has been £4.1 billion lent to SMEs through 25,000 approved applications from a total group of applications of 52,000. Now that's a significant increase on last week, where there was 2.8 billion circulated through 16,000 applications. However, the British Chambers of Commerce survey has revealed, in terms of their group of survey respondents, that about 57% of businesses are not intending to access this finance, and it seems that at least a third of those are citing the fact that they fear they won't be able to pay back the loan. So there's still pressure on the government to see if they are able to support that scheme through 100% guarantee rather than the 80% guarantee that they're currently offering. However, good news, there are 4 more lenders now who are approved for the CBIL scheme, so that's 52 lenders now, and indeed one of our own members, that's ThinCats, has been approved as well. So moving in the right direction, access to finance is there, still taking probably slightly longer than all of us would like, and still some reticence from the smallest businesses maybe to engage in that. But there was another piece of good news this week, and that was the launch of something that's now being called the bounce back loan. So these are more immediate loans that smaller businesses can access. It's an online application process. The Chancellor has promised that businesses will get money dropping into their account within 24 hours of their application being approved, and their applications should be streamlined through quite quickly. And these are loans of between £2,000 and £50,000, 100% guaranteed by the government, with interest free for the first 12 months. So that's ready cash for the very smallest businesses that are trying to survive and navigate their way through this crisis. So I think that's probably the update so far on government support. If I look into our membership now, there's been some great stories that we've heard this week, and I just wanted to let you know about a few of them. You've probably read them already on our Twitter feed or on our LinkedIn feed. And the first one I want to focus on is Aquascot. So Aquascot, many of you will know, an EOA member, salmon and trout processing business. In fact, one of the biggest EO businesses in Scotland. and they've been donating some of their products, their salmon and their trout, to some of the most vulnerable people in the community. They've also been supporting a local school who are producing visors by accessing the plastic used by one of their suppliers of the trays that they put the fish in, as well as giving a cash donation to that school. So that's absolutely fantastic news and really demonstrates community support of that particular business. Another one I want to focus on is John Lewis Partnership. You might have heard this week that in addition to all the work they've been doing with the Nightingale hospitals, where they've been providing products and coffee machines and the like for the wellbeing areas of those Nightingale facilities, they've also reopened their factory in Lancashire this week, and they're now producing gowns for the NHS, and scrubs, I think, is the phrase that people are using. And they're also donating 20,000 metres of fabric for the various people around the country who are producing scrubs at home as well as making donations in other places. And lastly, I wanted to focus on two of our professional service company members, Make, who are using 3D printers to produce visors, and Tate Hindle, who are also using 3D printers to produce masks, but also the connector valves that are used for these new innovative ventilators. So some fantastically heartwarming stories from the network. I'm sure there's many more out there. If you have a story of something that your business is doing, please do tell us, because it's great to be able to promote that and capture that for the future. So let's move on to today's webinar. Leadership has never been more important, undoubtedly, than where we are now in the middle of this crisis. And I think we all believe, don't we, that EO businesses are better at leadership because they are better at managing their people, and of course their people are their owners. And I'm absolutely delighted that today we've got two renowned employee-owned businesses joined us, the managing directors of each, who are going to talk to us about their own leadership challenges over the last few weeks, and also a renowned author and journalist who very recently wrote a paper for our research partner Ownership at Work on leadership. It was called Redesigning the CEO. The link to this report, by the way, will be circulated after the webinar this morning. So first of all, I'd like to welcome Claus Hjoerringgaard, who's the Managing Director of DustScanAQ. Claus is relatively new to the EOA, having joined DustScan last year. So you're very welcome this morning, Claus, and we're looking forward to hearing some of your reflections on the last few weeks of this roller coaster that we're calling the pandemic.
Thanks very much, Deb, and good morning, everyone. It's interesting to talk to you all about this troubled times that we all finding very challenging, and I'm very grateful to be able to talk to you a little bit about how we tackle this situation. So just to I guess set the scene, I'm managing a company outside of Oxford. It's a boutique consultancy doing air quality and dust consultancy. We're a small firm with 14 people. We were founded in 2004 and became an employee ownership business in 2018 December wise, where we were, well, I guess we bought the company off the founder, and the founder is still a chairman of us. I joined DustScan in 2019, having done all sorts of different things and also being part of employee-owned business before, but probably not in the way that we have it here. Our current setup under the lockdown is that we have a small skeleton of individuals who's in the office, because we do need to do lab work, we do need to do samples, as things that we just can't do from home. We have individuals who are furloughed, and then we have an awful lot of people who are sitting in front of the screen, maybe not Zoom, but then what we do in Microsoft 365. And I think it's a new thing for all of us, but it's what we have. Our daily focus is the 3 C's, because that's what you do when you are under a crisis, and a crisis that we've never been before. So it's cost, client, and cash. So I try to have, I guess, an annual review on a daily basis. So I understand exactly what's coming in, and what's going out. I understand what's what kind of work we have and who needs to do it. I think these days it's all about being in control as much as you can. And when I talk about control, it's not easy to be in control. I've running business for 20 years, and this is probably the first time where I've felt so little in control over the first, I think, at least three weeks of the lockdown, because there was so many things we just didn't know about, and the government didn't know about, and so forth and so forth. And even though I try to, of course, give tasks to people on a daily basis, I still like to be in control, and that was tough. It was really tough. I didn't know about the furloughing thing. When do we get paid? What happens? I didn't know about the loans. Does clients pay us? One thing is that we still do the work, but hey, do they actually put money in our bank account, and so forth and so forth? Lots of things that put us in a situation that we've never been before and just made things uncertain. Our daily routine is that we have a 9 o'clock in the morning. I try to stay positive, because I think that's one of the things that we have to be as leaders. We have to be positive no matter what we meet. So I do have the silver lining moments. In the infancy, it was very easy to have a silver lining moment, because there was a lot of air quality, water quality, environmental things that came up on the internet and so forth. That everything that I guess that the animals and the world was doing better. So I had these as a silver lining. But of course, the further you get into this, it gets harder and harder to find the silver linings, because all you hear about on BBC and so forth is the horrible things that's happening. But I think it's very important for all of us to create that silver lining, to create that motivation, because that's part of our job. So part of it was being positive, also giving my spin on what did I see last night on BBC, how do I evaluate that, what does that mean for us, and so forth. And then of course the third step was to talk about what happens today. So everyone is part of that 9 o'clock. Everyone is also part of the 4 o'clock call. So later on, that's kind of closing down the day. So what happened today? Finding good things, finding positive things. Remember to cherish the good things that we've done, because it's very easy to find the black things in a day. But right now, we also need to remember the good things that we did in one day and keep motivating people. So again, the 4 o'clock is a lot about closing down the day, say thank you, and then being ready for the day after. In between, there's all sorts of things happening. I think mental health for all of us is key. Over the last weeks, it's been about, well, yesterday I had one of my colleagues who said, well, my niece is struggling and my sister-in-law is struggling, and then we went through that. As a leader, you can't really say, well, I can't talk to you about that. You can't compartmentalize it and say, no, that's not for me. You have to actually find ways of giving good advice. I guess take a little bit of a breather before you give the advice, because we're going through things that we've never been before, but still giving individuals, I guess, the hope and the ideas and what you do through a day. Last week, I had a long chat with somebody about, I guess, how to just get it all away. You know, just we talked about how you can potentially sit down, have a breather, have 10 seconds, maybe you need to eat well, you need to create that space where you can just relax, because it just hits you so hard from any angle, and as people, especially with me with a small team, I need to make sure that people are just doing everything they can to get through a day. Meditation is a thing I've talked a lot to people about. Maybe this 20 minutes, you know, or 30 minutes on a daily basis is a good thing around lunchtime, just to erase everything in your head and then just be ready for the remainder of the day. I think for all of us, it's just finding our way to cope with what's right, what's wrong, what we can deal with, and just get through the day. And also remember, as leaders, you guys, I just mentioned that I have a 9 o'clock. I spend a lot of time between 7 and 9 o'clock in the morning just to get my head right, just make sure that I can actually go through the day, make sure that I think a lot about the silver lining things that I just talked about, because you don't really want to be there talking a lot about lots of positives and knowing that there's lots of negatives as well. So it needs to be a balanced thing. You don't want to look like an idiot, and you could easily do that. There's nothing that's easy these days. There's nothing that's positive, but there is a balance, and we need to hit that. So the mental health of your employees, the mental health of myself, trying to do, make sure that I do the exercise every day, try to make sure that I eat healthily, try to make sure that I get challenged in my brain in the right balance is really key for me and for my team. It's just not easy times. I spoke a little bit about our daily routines. We also have a weekly routine. We have the Friday Code Red, where I speak to my chairman, and we report to our trustees about what's happening this week, what are the actions we do. There's an awful lot of things that we have to deal with at the moment, where we, in the normal way, we would have a lot of discussions and so forth, but there's just a lot of things that you have to deal with immediately. So sometimes I do make decisions where I might have to talk to people about it afterwards and say, well, what I did was this, and I know that we should have talked about it, but actually I do need action, because finances dictate, work dictate, and so forth. So it's important to have that, I guess, relationship with your trustees, with your board, and also with your team, because we are all environmentally owned. We are all having beneficiaries everywhere, but sometimes it's just not possible to make sure that you have the discussion. We have this thing in Danish saying that you take off your shoes and your socks, and then you have a lot of discussions, and then you might come to a decision. It's not always time for shoes and socks. It's just time for make decisions, because it's tough times, and there's just no time to have all these, I guess, discussions. But it's important to make the communication happening. Make sure that you might make it fast, but then you will discuss it to people afterwards, because people are sitting out there not wondering what's going on. You know, what is he doing? What are they doing? And it's just important to have that communication happening on all levels.
Klaus, that's a fantastic account, actually, of where you're at. And you started with the 3 C's. You talked about cost, client, and cash. I think the last few minutes you've actually added a 4th C to that, which is about care for yourself and care for the team. Thank you so much. And we're going to come back to some of the things you've said there. So I'm now going to move on and invite our second speaker. Chris McDermott is the Managing Director of the One-to-One Diet by Cambridge Weight Plan. Chris is also a board member of the EOA. Absolutely delighted you can join us this morning, Chris. Looking like a 1980s DJ, as I said on to you this morning. Looking forward to hearing your thoughts on the challenge of leadership of the One-to-One Diet over the last few weeks.
Thanks, Deb, and good morning to everybody from strange locations around the country. My name is Chris McDermott. I'm the Managing Director of the One-to-One Diet by Cambridge Weight Plan. We used to be formerly known as the Cambridge Diet. We're based in Corby in Northamptonshire. We've been 100% employee owned since 2015. and we employ 245 people. We call these people employee stakeholders. I'll be using that word quite a lot in the next couple of minutes. We manufacture low-calorie shakes, soups, bars, and meal packs, and we sell our products through a network, a direct sales network of 6,500 independent people who we call consultants, and we export to around 30 countries around the world. So my experience over the last few weeks, it feels like few months, in fact it feels like a few years, but actually it's only been about 5 weeks, has been the speed of things, the speed of change, the speed of the shock of the change, and then the speed in which we've had to react to the changing situation around us. And it's really been very interesting for us to move very quickly like this, and to focus very, very early on our core operational requirement, our critical mission that we had to do. We're a food manufacturing business, so we've been allowed to continue to operate, and our core role now is to manufacture our products, dispatch our products, and then ship them to our consultants so that they can sell those products. And that is the survival mechanism of the business, and that's very much in the now, what we are doing this very day. So as Claus was saying, the 3 C's are really nice. So the preservation of cash for us is an absolutely vital thing for us as a business. This may be similar with other EO businesses, but we are 100% employee owned, so we do not have any external shareholders. So we've ensured through the good work that our finance director has done over many years that we've got an excellent relationship with our bank, but also cash in our business is king at the moment and will remain so for some time. The speed of things meant that we had to become dislocated from the manufacturing areas, so quite a few people have been working from home. Some people aren't, and they have to come in and operate all the machines. So that's created some challenges for us in terms of communications and explanations. But we took a decision very, very quickly, very early on, to delegate the operational day-to-day running of the business to our heads of departments, and they've done a sterling job. In fact, one of the things that we will be really keen to take from this whole experience is how those guys have taken on that responsibility and really driven the business forward. And the directors in that sense, so we formed a critical incident team that meets every day, or did meet every day up until the beginning of this week, and our job is really to support the heads of department as they run the day-to-day operations and make sure they've got the resources to do that. One of the things we also didn't get stuck on is trying to create a plan to deal with the crisis. We've dealt with the crisis as it's happened. We haven't tried to create a plan, or we haven't tried to pull a plan from somewhere else or some other business. Our problems and our challenges are very unique to us, and I'm sure they would be for every company. So we've just got stuck into trying to work out what to do, not trying to work out a plan of how to do it. That's meant that we've made some really big fundamental business changes. We've had to, because of the nature of the business that we're in, which is weight loss, and our business is very much a person-to-person experience. And of course, in the lockdown, that's quite difficult to do. So we've done some big fundamental business changes that would have probably taken us months, maybe even years, to bring into fruition in some cases in a couple of days. And they're not perfect, and they're not the finished article, but they're as good as they're going to get, and they're good for what we've got now. But that has taught us and is teaching us just how quickly and agile we can actually be. And I think, again, that will be something that we take as we come out of this experience. I'm really proud to say that we feel that we've acted quickly, we've acted with courage, and we've acted quite decisively, and really with the mindset that the best we can hope for is we'll get more right than we get wrong. And at the moment, that's the philosophy that we're taking forward. As I say, we've been monitoring the situation every day, but we're starting now to get into a kind of living with the lockdown world. So our teams that did meet every day are now starting to meet every couple of days, just as things slowly kind of settle down a little bit. But they're very intense. We're very focused on the financial situation. We also do a session each day on government updates, and I'm really keen for us to do that, because there's so much speculation, there's so much stuff in the press, there's so much on the media, there's very little actual concrete information. So we only focus and talk about those rather than allowing ourselves to get sort of run off with all of the speculation that's going on. As an employee-owned business, I think we've done a very good job at communicating. I think inherently employee-owned businesses are pretty good at communication because they have to be. We've done all sorts of stuff. Some of it's been great, some of it's been not so great. Some of the stuff we've still got to learn how to do, we've still got to develop. But we almost instinctively, I think, decided that we were going to communicate as much as we possibly could with as many of our internal stakeholders as well as our external stakeholders. And we've put that into 3 categories: operational resilience, financial resilience, and human resilience. So each time that we do a message internally, we put the messages into those 3 categories so that people can understand it. It's relatively easy to work out what we're saying. We're not using a lot of jargon. The language has become more personal over the last couple of weeks as we've got better at creating it. But in those communications, we very much focus on facts, not speculation. So we're not saying we hope this, we think this, we do this. We're saying this is where we are. This is the situation as it is today. We will be reviewing it, and if we make a change, or we decide to do something differently, we will do it, and we will tell you. So communication's a big deal for us. The other thing that we've been really strong on is this integrity and empathy. It's been really interesting to experience the lockdown and experience and see how it's affected people in very different ways. So in our business, we've got people who are in one sense are very, very worried about it and really frightened. And on the other side, we've got people who don't really care about it and couldn't, just want to carry on as normal. And I imagine the country's a bit like that. So we're trying as best as we can to find the best place in between of those 2 positions to take the business forward and to have a sort of set line that we're going to take. The other thing that I've had to deal with personally is a kind of recognition and acknowledgement that I've been in mourning, and that's the only best way I can come up with as an expression for a future that we're not going to now have. So a couple of months ago, we created a really exciting 5-year strategy based on the world that now doesn't exist. And so we've had to, over the course of the last couple of weeks, we've kind of had to let that go. And that's been very challenging because you have to accept that it's happening and then kind of reset yourself for the recovery phase that we now find ourselves in. So my big thing has been, guys, we need to act quickly, but we also need to do it with integrity. So whatever decisions we make, we need to sense check them just as much as we can so that when we get through this and we look back, we can say, yes, we acted quickly, we made those decisions, but also we can still look ourselves in the mirror and say, yeah, we did as best as we could with the information that was available to us at the time. As Claus was mentioning, I think it's really important to recognise and acknowledge the stresses and pressures that yourself are under, but also the team, and how people deal with this situation in very different ways, recognizing that people are working from home in very different circumstances and in different environments, and it's okay to feel pressured, and it's okay to feel down, and it's okay to feel that that this is a difficult period, because it is. But as long as we can continue to communicate, to talk, and to share those experiences, we can get through it. Just finish on a positive note, we've just begun to think about the world in what we're calling the recovery phase. And the best way I can kind of explain it is that for the last couple of weeks, we've been frantically dancing on the dance floor to 1980s techno pop. And we've been just so into it and so engrossed in it. And we've taken a little bit of time over the last couple of days, actually, to just stand up on the balcony and look down a little bit on what's going on, and then also to look outwards and to start to think about where the world might be going and our place within it. And I think it's really important to, as a leader of an organization, to give people the hope that things will get better. As Claus was saying, I don't think you can just be blindly optimistic about the world. You need to find the balance between the two, but you need to give people hope that there will be a brighter future. The challenge will come later of creating a new strategy that will make that hope a reality. But at the moment, you just need to let people see that there is a future for the business, and there is a future for all of us.
Thank you, Chris. I've now got the image of you in a 1980s nightclub dancing on the dance floor.
Oh, very much so. Yes, that was my era. That was it. It was fantastic.
Yeah, some really important messages there. I mean, I think obviously focusing on the speed of decision making that's been happening. I think I mentioned this previously. There's a saying that I've been holding on to, which seems to just be very pertinent, which is something that Lenin said, which is there are decades when nothing happens and there are weeks when decades happen. And I think that's what most leaders have been experiencing over the last few months. So I'd now like to welcome our third speaker for this morning, Stephan Stern. Stefan is a renowned author and a columnist. He has had a previous role at the High Pay Centre and is the author of the latest Ownership at Work report, Redesigning the CEO. And I know Stefan's got some really interesting perspectives on this community that we all know so well, the employee ownership community. So I'm really welcoming you this morning, Stefan, and interested to hear your reflections on what you've heard.
Well, thank you, Deb. Good morning, everyone. It's very good to be here and listen. I really like what you said earlier, Deb, about care. It's a word we're hearing a lot of in the news, whether it's social care, care homes, or care as a verb as well as a noun. And of course, management so often is about paying attention and caring. I wouldn't want to be, I wouldn't want to be a business that doesn't have what EO businesses have and what the best EO leaders have, which I saw traveling around the country a bit and speaking to people last summer. I wouldn't want to be without the levels of understanding of the imperatives and priorities of a business that I saw, spontaneously offered up and bubbling up from different shop floors in different contexts. I wouldn't want to be without that sort of commitment, thoughtful commitment and engagement of the workforce, the owners who you see face to face every day. You hope normally, if only on a screen now rather than in the office. And I wouldn't want to be without that sort of open leadership. I think we've seen two very good examples of it just now. Open, candid, concerned leadership, thoughtful leadership, which I'm not saying you can't find beyond the employee-owned sector, but certainly in the businesses I met, it was universally present. And that does give you an advantage. In other words, I wouldn't want to start from here if I wasn't able, as a leader or in a business, I wasn't able to experience and see up close those sorts of qualities that you find in EO. So caring, I think, is at the heart. I think we heard that. Yes, cash, yes, moving quickly and decisively. Again, against the stereotype or the caricature that some people outside the sector might have, that somehow because there's consultation, because there's a culture of trying to establish consensus, that this makes businesses slower. I think what we've just heard is that's actually quite wrong. I mean, almost the opposite of the truth, in fact, because when a leadership team and an organization understands and is settled on direction and the necessary tasks, of course, you move that much quicker and more decisively and more smoothly when people are actually genuinely on board and engaged in the way that we see usually in employee-owned businesses. So these are, of course, difficult times, and it can also give you, as Chris said, it can also give you the courage to act, even though you haven't got all the information, of course, that you would like to know, even about the next fortnight, about the next month, never mind further out into the future. I think that sort of openness, honesty, as Claus said, really thinking very hard about how he's going to lead discussions, listening to the answers, of course, which is the other thing, as obviously we see in PLC land, in the stock market world, where so much of the CEO's communication is essentially outward, and to an investor community, people they very often don't know very well at all, people with whom they have very brief relationships. Quite the opposite in EO land, where you're really engaged to and with each other, and that means the leaders are having to listen and want to listen. The good ones I met couldn't listen enough to their workforces. So communication not being something you just shove out to people, well, being absolutely a two-way process. And someone clever once said to me, well, communication is really a result, not an intention. And I think that implies the big listening bit and making sure that you understand before you try to be understood. But the EO leaders I met got this very well, do it as second nature. So although it's a difficult moment, it's a horrible moment for people in business, and unpleasant decisions are having to be taken, I think people watching this from the EO sector should be confident that you know, your instincts are the right ones, and the way you go about your business is the right way, and it will see you through to the better times that Chris was referring to.
Thanks, Stefan. I'd like to invite now Claus and Chris back, and we've got the full panel. And let's just dig into a little bit of what you two have been talking about. I think it was interesting, I've been writing all sorts down. I think I'd probably like to just focus a little bit on bringing two elements of what Claus and Chris, you both talked about, which is the decisiveness now of making the right decisions at this moment in time, but then you both talked about giving hope and motivation and inspiring, because you've got to be able to look ahead. So I guess the interesting thing is, how do you balance those two off? You're making decisions now because you have to, but you need to keep an eye on the future. So how are you going to bring those two together? At what point do you see that coming together? Is it too soon to start thinking about the future, or should leaders now be preparing to think about the future? Chris, you seem to be nodding along and laughing at me. I don't know whether or not that's good or bad.
No, it's because we've been having that very challenging discussion within the company this week. So at what point do we begin to start creating a budget for the next financial year, a financial outlook, those sort of questions? And there's a healthy debate going on in the business about how much information we've actually got to make decisions, or to make any kind of longer term outlook on now. And I think we've kind of decided that we're going to give ourselves a few more weeks of being in the now, in the moment, because the way our sales have worked is that we've had real roller coaster numbers. And so it's very difficult to predict what's going to happen in the next 12 months based on 25 days worth of lockdown figures. But it's coming, and it's very important that we do set out our kind of plan as best as it could be. But I think at the moment it's probably a bit too early, and I worry that if we start to forecast too far out, then we're really kind of getting into real speculation land, and it feels a little bit early, but we have begun the conversation about it.
Claus, have you got anything to add to that?
Yeah. I think part of it is this thing about being in control. If we all think about 5 weeks ago, when we had the lockdown, when the PM gave us that communication, and we felt a little bit in chaos, to be absolutely honest. And the last thing I thought about was strategy about, well, what happens in 2, 3, 5 years. It was all about, well, how do we survive? Let's look at today. So it's 5 weeks on. I feel more in control. I feel more knowing about furloughing, when we get the money. I feel more about, well, what kind of work do we get in on a weekly basis? Because I can see the last 5 weeks. Do we get paid? And so forth and so forth. And that kind of gives me the urge to start thinking about, okay, we probably know that we have COVID-19 for the next year or two. How do we want to operate? What is the strategy for us going forward? Do we want to maybe, instead of having 37.5 hours a week spread over 5 days, do we want to have it over 3 or 4 days? Do we now want to, have more time in front of the screen? How could we all change in a way so that we can, work with what we know is coming? Another thing I also think a lot about is the firepower of the individuals that we have. So we have a big team, big or small, we have various people, but we have to remember that sometimes raising issues and getting the feedback from the team is really important. I tend to think I don't want to really raise the bad things, because I don't want to raise any additional problems, things, and so forth. But actually, sometimes when I raise it, I get fantastic answers and ideas that we can all use. And I think we probably is in a situation where we need the firepower of the individuals in the organization who actually all owns our business to find out, okay, so what are we going to do in the future? One of the things we're also doing at the moment is talking about, so, okay, what did we do in the last 5 weeks? How did it work? What was good? What was bad? We've never used Teams before, and I assume never ever. We've been a small company. We haven't gone too much out to clients. Of course, we do go out to clients once in a while, but we are sitting next to each other. Now we've been through 5 weeks where we haven't been sitting next to each other. How did that work? What was good? What was bad? Maybe also removing some of these, I guess, things that you have naturally saying, oh, this is shit. Sorry, my language. This doesn't work. Actually, it did work. So let's remember these things and find ways, because the future is going to hold ways. And the ones that thinks most about this, not forgetting the daily annual review and so forth, are probably the winners.
So it's learning from what we've been through. Yeah. Stefan, is that what you just heard there is, let's build on the successes that we've had over the last few weeks, and let's not lose those successes. Is that what you think you're hearing across business more broadly about when do you start looking to the future?
Well, I think there has got to be some hope, hasn't there? I mean, no one wants to turn up for a shift, whether it's at home or in a workplace, with pessimism in the air. There's got to be realism. It's got to be facts. Both our leaders speaking this morning have talked about the need for fact rather than speculation, and being a realist, because that doesn't do anybody any favors either if you're a fantasist. But having said that, there's got to be a glass half full. You know, there's got to be the positive on that reality and a path to the future, because obviously that is a key task of any leader. You know, this is where I think we are going. Not arrogant, but I think this is the route out of this, and here are the landmarks along that way, and here's what we're aiming for, and here's a really big goal that we're going to keep in mind as well, because this isn't just about the next month. There is a long-term future, we hope. But yeah, absolutely, a path to the future that you can believe in and commit to.
Yeah. We've got some questions coming in, as I expected we would. So if we're going to run over a little bit, but as I said earlier, if you have to leave us, then please do download the video afterwards. So I'm going to take some questions now. So we've had a question about, has the role of your democratic body changed or developed in helping you to shape your thoughts? Now, I think I know the answer, because I think, Chris, you quite rightly said the speed of change and the need to make decisive decisions has meant quite often you've not been consulting. But has anything about the way you currently engage and consult, has that body changed, or is that too early to say? Will it change in the future?
No, it hasn't changed, and I think coming into this, we were a pretty sort of lean, flexible kind of organisation. We weren't acting as quickly as we've been acting now, but we were pretty well structured in how the business operates. What we've done much more of is the communication part of it. So whereas in the past we may have done things and then it would have taken us a little bit of time for that information to get across to everybody, that's almost now happening on a daily basis. So if anything, people within the stakeholders and the trustees are more informed than ever about what's actually happening in the company and about what we're doing. The decision-making process still kind of rests as it has done with the operational board of the company. And all we've really done is make decisions quicker and explain them as best as we can afterwards. But afterwards is almost like, 30 minutes, an hour a day rather than an end of month report.
So that employee ownership culture has just supported you well and is still there in its
absolutely, yeah. And I think one of the things that's really important about making these decisions so quickly is, and this is something that you can't create, is the trust. So we've been employee owned for a long time. We've been 100% employee owned for 5 years. I hope that we've inherently built up some trust between us all, that we're all in it together and we're all trying our best to get through this. So if stakeholders and trustees see that we're making these decisions, there's an element of, okay, I trust these guys, and if it goes wrong, then it was done with the best intentions, rather than we're just going to make irrational decisions. So that trust thing is really, really important, and it's something I think that within EO businesses particularly is quite strong.
I think, it's interesting, somebody's commented here about they're surprised they haven't heard more about purpose, values, ethos, ideology and culture being brought out more explicitly. You know, I guess what we've all been discussing, what you've been saying, is you've been characterising the culture of employer-owned businesses through the actions. I'd be interested to know, Stefan, it's easy in our echo chamber of employee ownership to take all this for granted. You know, what you've heard from these two leaders, you know, I could have invited other leaders to this morning's conversation. I don't doubt we'll have heard a lot of the same. Are we a bit naive to think that this is just how it works and other businesses probably work like this? You've got that external perspective.
No, I don't think it's naive, and it's a good question. It's a very good observation, comment from the person who's watching in. But it kind of goes back to my point about I wouldn't want to start from here if I didn't have all those things grounded and at the heart of the business already. And I think that's the point about EO. You were doing this already. You didn't need a new speech about purpose. You know, that wouldn't have been new information to any of your colleagues and your owners. They do know that already. They're paid into it literally. They're invested literally as well as emotionally. I think the trouble comes for the companies who suddenly try to discover purpose in the middle of a crisis, and actually the workforce don't buy it because they know that there hasn't been a lot of purpose perhaps in the run-up to this crisis. So I think I would put it the other way around. I don't want you to be complacent, but everything I saw told me that people already understood purpose. They weren't having to discuss it necessarily, but they knew it.
I heard an interesting observation the other day. Somebody was talking about reputations will be made through this crisis. And Chris, you talked about the integrity of you know, doing the right thing. Isn't it the case actually that reputations won't be created, they'll be revealed? And you know, what's going to happen here is these businesses that are already purpose-driven, highly engaged, with strong cultures of collaboration and shared purpose, are actually just going to, you know, bounce off that and leverage off that, and the way they behave. Therefore, they will come out as a saint, not a sinner, at the end of all of this. I'd like to think so. I've got one last interesting question I want to bring out. Val King, who we know very well, who's part of the EOA network. Good morning, Val. She's got an assertion here. She thinks we've got crisis between April and August. We've got convalescence between September and March, and we'll go into recovery from next April. Any thoughts? How does that feel to you two? Is that scary? What you've sort of more or less thinking? So crisis, convalescence and recovery, but recovery not until April, Val is suggesting.
I'll just jump in. Sorry, I'm loath, I must say, to put any dates to things, particularly as you can get swayed really easy if you read the press. Particularly, this is going to happen this day, that's going to happen that day, this is going to happen then, that's going to happen then. I do recognise the concept that she's talking about, but I don't think you can put any kind of date to it at all. So, but we're using the word recovery. We're starting to use the word recovery as a sort of almost the beginning of a map to get us out of where we are. But we can't put any dates or timeline on it at the moment because it's for us it's just it's too early. But I understand the concept.
Claus, you mentioned that you actually used the words, and I wrote them down because I thought we might get an immediate reaction from a few of the people who are listening. We've only lost 2 people since 1:45, so that's good. You're obviously a good panel this week. You mentioned this might go on for the next year or 2, actually, is what you said. So what's your thoughts on the next few months and years?
I think, again, don't forget today. Don't forget what's happening right now with what's getting into your bank. Again, the pipeline you have, the order book you have, and so forth. You just have to stay on top of that on a daily basis. There's no two ways about it. But I also think that you have to start thinking about, okay, so how could it open up? We all listen to what BBC says at 5, 6, 8, 10 or so at night. We have it on our phones. I have a lot of input from Denmark, being Danish, Sweden, Germany, and so forth and so forth. So I do think that we as individuals have to start thinking about what is fronting us and how could we fight it, and also how could we be intelligent about it. I remember, well, joining DustScan in August last year. The first thing I was met with was Brexit, and then my FD said to me, "Oh, damn! Now coronavirus happens." I was really hoping that we blitz it this year, but I do think that it's all about how we tackle these things. Yes, we do stay in the moment, and we do have to remember and understand everything that happens every day. But we also do need to start thinking about how can we open up? How can we intelligently attack this? How can I work with my clients knowing that we have to stay 2 meters apart, we have to wash our hands, and so forth and so forth? How can I attack that maybe in an intelligent way so I can communicate to them, and maybe they can start opening up early on because they know how we act? So I think we are getting in that point where there's less uncertainty for me with furloughing, with money and so forth. But now it's time to still remember daily things, but also how can I attack this going forward? And I do believe that, it is not something that goes away early. I think the coronavirus will be here for a year or two. I don't know how long, but that's a year for me is long.
Yeah.
So I might as well start thinking about it.
Val, I'm not sure if that answered your question, but I think there's clearly a view there that we can't put timescales around this, and we need to act in the moment as well. I'm just going to bring it back to one last question, which I think is really important, because this is about humility and humanity. And somebody's raised a question, Chris, about your comment about mourning a future. And I think all of us as leaders get that very much, because part of our job, isn't it, is to look ahead and look at the skyline and see where we might go. They've asked, have you shared that with your team? Have you shared your thoughts about the mourning that you're going through, and how did they react? And I suspect people are looking for a bit of support here, because maybe they want to be as honest and as open as you are.
Yes, I have shared it with my fellow directors. We haven't sort of sat round on a Zoom call and specifically spoken about it, but we have talked about it, and I think it was I recognised it because of the emotional effect it was having on me, because I'm a futurist by nature, so I'm always thinking about what can we do, where can we go, what's going to be like, and really kind of put those flags in the ground in the future. And we had some great plans, and it's not to say that they've all kind of just completely gone, but there was this sense of we were driving really in a really powerful and as Claus was saying, in a way in which we were very much in control of what we were going to do, and we're very much in control of our destiny. And all of a sudden it's just kind of boop, and there's and because the speed of this has been so quick, there's this feeling that it didn't sort of arrive in one day. It incrementally dawned on me over the course of a week or so that future's no more. And it's taken, I don't think I'm actually probably through it yet. I'm still going through the process of experiencing it. And I think eventually I will, and eventually we will create a new future. But it's not going to be the one that we had in mind only a few weeks ago. And I think it's the speed of that has been quite challenging. And when I've spoken about it with my colleagues, it's really just to kind of share the experience, because one of the things that's been, sorry Deb, just quickly, one of the things that I found really interesting and certainly didn't appreciate about this experience was the different realities that everybody's in. And part of my job now is to try as best as I can to get as many people into the same reality as possible in terms of driving the business forward. And part of that is acknowledging both personally and professionally that the future is going to be different. And if I can bring as many people into that discussion as possible, we can then start collectively to say, okay, so what will the new future be? And let's start building that, and let's start kind of focusing on that. But I'm not there yet. I'm kind of still in the middle of the kind of process of mourning for the future we've lost.
Thank you. Stefan, can I ask you to see if you can sum up a little bit? That's a bit unfair of me, isn't it? I'm just thinking this conversation could go on for a while longer, and we maybe need to revisit this topic again at some point. But given your more helicopter view, I think, of business per se, and you're able to do a very strong piece of reflection on outside the EO sector versus what you've heard this morning, I just would welcome hearing what you thought, what your takeout thought's going to be from this morning.
Thank you. Well, just very briefly, I think realism. I think what Claus said about, you know, cash and daily transactions in and out. I mean, of course, so realism about the difficulty that you're in, and acknowledging that it's uncertain in the future. But I also like Chris's emphasis on recovery, because, you know, when things stop getting worse, which again, it's probably perhaps premature to claim that they are stopping getting worse, but when shortly things stop getting worse, of course, you know, technically that's when recovery begins. And of course, we always get this wrong on the macro scale with the economy. We always, the aggregate GDP data, a lag indicator, always mislead us about what's really happening on the ground in businesses, SMEs, and so on around the country. So recovery is absolutely, I think Chris is absolutely right to talk about recovery and to think about recovery. And so I take that away from this morning too, that yes, honesty, yes, courage to act, to do the difficult things, to share. I also really like Chris sort of giving permission to his top team, as it were, to recognize how they're feeling and talk about it, because I think that's very important. But yeah, but think about recovery and think about this emerging reality, uncertain as it is. I think that we heard some very encouraging thoughts today.
Brilliant. Well, can I thank each of you, and especially Claus and Chris, who are joining us from very busy schedules, no doubt taking you away from what you should be doing this morning. Thanks, Stefan, as well, for his excellent insight and commentary. And I was just struck by a couple of things that, well, I've been struck by everything that was said. I loved, Claus, your comment about firing up the firepower of the individuals within the EO business, which I think fundamentally is where we will all see success moving forwards, where we're able to coalesce our employee owners together around our shared purpose, our new purpose maybe, Chris, you know, the new future that we need to map out. But also the empathy and the compassion and the integrity that you've each talked about and displayed, both to yourselves and that duty of care, but also to your employees. So I hope all of our guests this morning have enjoyed our discussion. This is, as you know, part of our weekly events. So you can carry on keeping in touch with us during the next future. First of all, I think we've got a slide up. So don't forget, we've got these weekly webinars. I'll come to next week's in a minute. We've got our EO forum, the Hub forum. If you're an EO member, you can join that. That's our LinkedIn community. You can engage with your peers. You can ask questions. You can carry on this conversation. You'll get on a Monday afternoon our EO Community Weekly newsletter drop in your inbox. It's quite short and sweet, but actually points you to some of the latest information if you've not been reading that. And of course, do get in touch with us through all of the normal channels. We're here, albeit slightly reduced in size over the next few months, but we're still here, able to take your questions and support and help you. So next week's webinar is on the topic of trust and transparency and open communications. We've got another couple of interesting employer businesses and an advisor who are going to talk to us about some of the techniques for transparent and open communication. There will be a survey after this webinar this morning, so please do fill that in. Tell us what you'd like to hear more of, that's really important, and also tell us if you've been experiencing any challenges or have had success with applications for finance. So thank you again for joining us, taking an hour out of your day. We really appreciate it. Hope you have a good rest of the week, and we'll see you again next week. Thanks a lot.